Hi, we're going to be talking about chapter 7. That would be the arrays of Savitch book, version 10, edition 10. So first we're going to start with the introduction to arrays. And I broke the first section of 7.1 to few parts. So the first one, I'm going to start with that one. So we're going to start with arrays. So a couple of things we have to remember about arrays. And if you remember those things, then it's not going to be too bad. So I'm going to remind you as we go through the ones that can be potentially a little different than what we are used to. So we got to pay attention to them. So first thing first is, why do we need arrays? So far we know and we learn that we create variables to store our values in. We went through grade books and we saw that if we have 10 grades, we cannot create 10 different grade variables. I mean, we can, it's going to get very, very messy. So if we have a function that we want to open a file and read grades to something, then we had to do 10 different grades. Or even more than that, if we have a list of 35 students or a list of states, we need a bigger storage than creating variables. So that's what we have arrays to create a kind of a list, and then we just put them together. Of course, they have to have the same data type. So we're starting with how we want to, so we're starting on how we create arrays. So when we want to create arrays, we will put the data type, what kind of a data do we want to have it. We put the name of the array, some meaningful name. I know in this chapter, the author uses some small characters to do it, but we want to have better names for them. And of course, we're going to put the size in there. So that would be saying I'm creating a list of 5 elements called score, and then it's the type integer. So that would be the declaration. We can think about arrays of a list. Some people like to look at it as vertical. Some people look at it as horizontal. However it works for you doesn't really matter. So the key here is when we create 5 elements, my indices are from 0 to 4. This is something that we get to use to it. So our array index starts with 0, not 1. And then the last one is going to be 1 less than size. This is something that we got to get used to it. And unfortunately, C++ does not check the end of it, and we're going to talk about it and why it's doing that. And so we get to that. So the key right now is when we're creating an array, the first index starts with 0, and then it goes with size -1 for the last. So we can call them subscript, we can call them index. And the value in the bracket that we're talking about, subscript or index. So in this case is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we're going to have variables to store stuff. So we can call them indexed variable, we can call them subscribed variable, elements. I'm kind of used to call them elements. It doesn't really matter. So if we have an array, they will be talking about elements or indexed variable or the values that we're storing in array. Again, our array starts from 0, goes to 1 less than size. So the size, when we declare our array, the size is going to go there. So it's going to have 5 elements in there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the largest index is 1 less than size. So if I have 5, the maximum index I can use is 4. And the smallest one is always 0. So we can have a different data type for array. Again, just as a nature of C++, we have to think ahead that what kind of a data type do we want to have. And then we can have int, double, character, string, and later on, when you move on to the next course for more chapters, we're going to have some dynamic arrays that do a lot more stuff. But right now, we're just going to be working on the data types that we are exposed to, and that's what we're going to be using. So the key is, if I want to use the array, all the variables that I'm going to use inside the array have to have the same data type. So when I declare it as a double, that means everything is double inside. So referring back to the gradebook, if I have last name, first name, grade, then I cannot put all of that in one array because they are different data types. So I might need 2 arrays, one for names and one for grades, because they have to have same data type. Excuse me, I guess the copy doesn't work for me no more. So when we are using the index variables or elements of the array, they can be just used just like a regular variables. So for arrays, we're going to be using brackets. We're going to use the brackets to create array, and we're going to be using brackets to address elements inside the array. So when we're creating an array, we're going to put the size inside the square bracket, of course, with the data type. And if we want to reference element in an array, we're going to use the index. The key is, because we're starting with 0, element number 4 will have index 3. So that's something that we have to kind of play with it, practice on it to get used to it. That's something that we are not used to it, but we're going to get used to it. So because we're starting with index 0, the score 3, index 3, is going to be my 4th element in my list. So that's the 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, we have the highest number is 4. So if I have an array of 5 elements, the last one that I should use is 4, not 5. That's the common mistake we do it. And then we're going to talk about how to avoid that, or at least try our best to avoid it. So we can assign stuff to it. So we can say the score in this, we can have a variable for our index, but remember the index has to be integer. Our index cannot be anything else than integer. Of course, technically it should be unsigned integer, meaning that we cannot have a negative number in for the index. So we can have it as a variable. So in this case, I'm going to put 2 in the n. So n plus 1 is going to be 3. So it's going to put 99 in index 3, which is element number So if I have index 3, what element am I going to be changing? That would be element number 4. Okay, so the best way to go through arrays is a for loop, because we can control the end of array. So we can have something like this. We can have a starting point 0, our first element, and we're going less than size, which is 5 in this case. So if I build it like this, that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to guarantee that I'm not going to go beyond it. So I don't have to worry about going beyond my limit. And then we can go through it and do something. In this case, is going to be printing the score I. So the first time around is going to be 0. Second is going to be 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then in this case is deducting the score I from the maximum to basically know what's the distance between that one and the max. But the focus here is about the for loop, using it to go through arrays. So this is the display 7.1 from your book. That's going to show how is this done. I would suggest you run it, play with it, and bring the questions if you have any. So one way of doing arrays, and of course we have been talking about it, your author of the book and myself, not to use any hard-coded numbers in your program. So in this case, when I have a 5 here, I want to create a constant variable for it. Now, I have seen some people, they create a constant global variable, they call it 5. That is not a good idea. First of all, it has to have a meaning. What does that mean? Second of all, there is a possibility that somebody in the future would change the value of my constant global variable. So if the 5 was changed to 8, now the variable 5 is going to contain 8, which doesn't make any sense. So try not to use the value as a name of your constant. So we're going to be creating a constant that has some meaningful. Once again, constant has to be all uppercase. That's conventionally. So when I see or you see something is all caps, the first indication is this is going to be a constant variable. So when we define it as a constant variable, it can be global constant or it can be somewhere else, but let's say it's constant. So in this case, we call it number of students. So we're going to have a list of students. We're going to put 50 in there. Now we're going to use this constant variable to create our array. So now we're creating 50 element array. Then we're going to use a for loop, and we're going to use that constant as a placeholder for my size, and I can go through the list. Now, if I come in and I have more than 50 students, the best thing about this global constant is I just come in and change this 50 to 60, and I don't have to do anything to run the program. And in the future, you learn about the header file. Actually, the user himself or herself can change the number. We don't have to change it inside the code. So if I put hard-coded numbers, first of all, I have to change it in building the array. Second of all, I have to go and look for all the programs, look for number 50, figure it out if that number 50 is in fact the size of my array, and then change it to 60. So it can get very, very messy with the larger programs. So that's the way we're going to do it. Keep that in mind. That's the way we're going to do it. No hard-coded numbers in your code. Okay, so I have this again, just like an activity that hopefully if you have time, we're going to do it in the class, but you do it and practice on it about the things that I have the questions over here, and you can put a pause on it and go over them, write it down, and if you have any question, bring it in, and if you have time in the class, we can go over them as an activity. So I'm going to stop right here.